Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints Hour, an unusual government ad promoting organ donation. Is it creative or creepy? The ongoing peril of Somalian pirates. And looking back in hindsight, was there any way to prevent the Conquest Vacation fiasco? Stay tuned. And these are the issues we're presenting today to our Viewpoints guests for commentary. A government internet ad which we'll be showing you to promote organ donation. The question we'll be addressing, is the promotion creepy or creative? The ongoing menace of Somalian pirates. They've been making millions by hijacking merchant ships. Somalia's Prime Minister has now condemned the practice of paying out ransoms and the nightmare tourists have faced with Conquest Vacations. It has prompted Ontario Premier McGuinty to call for a review of the Travel Industry Council of Ontario. Now let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Reverend John Williams is a political activist. He is also founder of the Canadian Children's Rights Initiative. And Paul McKeever is leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario. And you, the viewer, as always on Viewpoints Days, you are our third guest. Feel free to call in at any time with any one of your questions today. Now, usually on the first story that we present to you, it's normally an article, but the Ontario government decided to put forth a web ad advocating organ donation. Now, what we're going to be doing is showing you that ad because after it, we're going to be discussing the whole issue about organ donation. And the question that we're asking you, do you think the video is creative or do you think it's a bit creepy? We want to hear your thoughts on that question, but you're also welcome to call in at any time about organ donation as a whole when you listen to what our guests and I are discussing today. So, if we have that video ready, let's take a look at it now.
Welcome to RecycleMe.org, the place where recycling moves from our curbsides to our insides. By clicking on this handsome tattoo, you can open me up and learn the ins and outs of organ and tissue donation. The heart, the lungs, even the eyes, they're all here for you to discover. Once you've checked me out, make a pledge to make a difference. Click on the Join the Movement link and become an organ and tissue donor. I've become one to save up to 8 lives, because if I'm not using them, why shouldn't someone else?
And if you go over to the Stories tab, you can then click on that. Well, there you have it. And in case you wondered what else happened with that video, well, the guy just basically stands there. Just stands there. I mean, you see a bit of movement, but he'll stand there forever. Okay, so that is the video. And the question that we're asking you, do you think it's creative or do you think it's creepy? I'm going to start with you on that one, Reverend Williams.
Well, you know, as a Canadian, I pretty much go with Marshall McLuhan, who said that the medium is the message. And in this case, the medium is a curious one. If I understand the ad correctly in the website, the point is to encourage people to now allow anybody to be an organ donor. But there are some really serious technical problems with this website. And consequently, it disallows about 90% of the population from accessing it and even signing up. There are other things with a bucket full of guts in the corner. This is bad taste.
I should be laughing at something like this,
no, it's
but
bad taste.
I think the audience knows me by now. I giggle sometimes over these absurd issues.
We know that you're sensitive and sensible. We know that about you, but I can't really say the same about the people who designed this website. The technology is too demanding for most of the computers in the country, in the province, and well, some of it's pretty tasteless.
You actually bring up some pretty good points there because you tackled it twofold, that it's insensitive, having that bucket full of guts as you put it. But on the other hand, the fact about how technical it is.
Well, on my computer, which is, I've got high-speed Rogers, the whole thing, and a pretty good computer, and I just got a jerky kind of message and kind of, not very good access. And I run through thousands and thousands and thousands of websites, so it's obvious to me that there's a problem here. And kids would look at it and laugh.
Yeah, you don't think it'll garner the seriousness?
It would gain their respect because it's cheap.
Okay, Paul, your views on this one?
Well, it is creepy, in my view, and it's encouraging children to think of their bodies as things that are worthless, to be left in a bin at the roadside and used by the state however the state chooses to use it. It's gory because it's leftist, because it's collectivist.
Yeah, there's a morbid twist to that.
Yeah, and it's sort of this cult of death that seems to haunt everything the left wants to do. They can't do anything in a tasteful way, it seems, especially with these websites. But you know, the real horror here is that the government is telling children, 14, well, and young adults up to 24 years old, it's the target group for this website, that you don't have any control over your body once it's gone. That there's only two choices. One, that somebody has to go without your organs and perhaps die. Or two, you have to give those organs but get no compensation at all. In other words, they would rather have someone die than allow you to charge for your organs. For example, bequeath them to the family so that the value of those organs could be used by your children or wife. Until choice is permitted in this province, until it's legal to set the price from $0 if you choose, or to something higher, until you're free to say who you do and do not want these organs to go to, I think it is immoral to contribute your organs, because in doing so, you're giving the state the power to say your freedom doesn't matter. If by refusing in this effort to give your organs until you have that choice about the price and etc., you have managed to twist the state's arm and to change the law and allow you to have control over the price and etc. of your organs, until they make that change, it's immoral in my view to be donating your organs.
Okay.
Well, as the left,
yes, and I knew you wanted to comment about that
I'd like to
one.
say a couple of things. First of all, at the Blue Jays game this week, and I'm not a baseball fan really. I used to play when I was a kid, but I don't watch it or anything. But I did read in the news that a young lad who's 12 or 13 years old had a heart transplant, was throwing out the first ball, and I mean, organ transplant is a real part of our society and our culture, and it's pretty much inescapable at this point. Many people's lives have been saved in this way, including people that I know and love. And so, I mean, there's a place for these kinds of things, and I have to say that I do not and cannot possibly take the kind of monetary approach that Paul does. I mean, I respect it, and I understand that business is business, but for me, there's another kind of human aspect where, as a community, not just a local community, but as a national and provincial community, we look to the well-being of each other. And that's, of course, why we have things like, health care. And, of course, I know some people don't really think that's necessary either, but I do. I think it's been a great benefit to the country.
Now, there are two things I think we need to expand on here. I'm going to get to the phone lines very shortly before we even do so. And one is more on the monetary issue, because I know that's been raised again and again, that perhaps people should be paid for organs, and some go so far as to suggest it should be done because it'll undercut the black market, which I don't buy that aspect of it, but it has been discussed as an issue of payment. And on the other hand, what you said about the left, there are grades of left, so that's something I want to bring back up, because you had another example that you gave me in the green room, and you said you'd mention it on air, because I really want you to tell that story, because it's absolutely deplorable.
Right.
And I take it when you say left, you perhaps mean leftist ideologues, because that's quite different than how, let's suppose, John has, you define, you say you're more of a centrist, but there are times you come out and you say that you're left, but you're not far left. And there are grades of left, but I want to return to that, so hold those thoughts for a moment. I want to hear what you have to say on the phone lines. Dr. Tom on line 1, go ahead.
Hello?
Hi, Dr. Tom.
It's Dr. Tom speaking. Just to put this in perspective, I am a retired pathologist, so I do know a little bit about the inside situation of this transplant game. It seems to me that one aspect is overlooked. I believe that the future of transplants lies in developing a minute heart that will fit in the chest cavity. In other words, an artificial heart. This has been done on a large scale. I think it was called Jarvik in the past. But all the propaganda, advertising and talk is about human transplantation. That takes away money and attention from developing a mechanical small heart, which is, I believe, what we need.
Dr. Tom, can you give us a little bit of information from your perspective as a retired pathologist on the issue of rejection when it comes to these foreign organs?
Well, I'm not an expert on this. I must qualify that right away. However, rejection is the rejection of foreign tissue, and it's not specific, of course, to the heart. It can be there for a kidney, which is, I believe, one of the organs in which most successful transplants have occurred. But still, the organ, the transplanted organ, can be rejected by the body's immune system. We have natural antibodies and natural antibody production against this. And in the medical profession, that is overcome temporarily for a period of, say, and I'm not an expert on this, about 3-4 weeks by giving immune suppression drugs such as cortisone.
Yes.
I'm no expert on this. This is a very
Well, you're not a transplant specialist, but you are a qualified medical doctor.
That's
Dr.
correct.
Tom, very unique insight, and that approach is something. Do you think? Yes, go ahead. You want to respond here?
Well, I've actually had transplants. I have silicone lens implants in my eyes, so I actually have something similar to what Dr.
Wow.
Williamson is talking
Wow.
about. I have silicone lens implants to replace my my lenses.
Because you were blind.
I was blind, yes, and so I have a website now, blindmansees.com, which is about Canada. That's the one thing. The other thing is that with the new kind of medical research, just briefly, it seems that they're beginning to plan and attempting to grow organs so that those are the things that could be implanted in people as need arose.
Now, when
Skin
you
is
talk
being
about-
grown in large masses at this point, for
Okay,
example.
I hear you. I hear you. Paul?
Well, I think the technology is wonderful, and I hope that the people who develop these technologies will be paid for the things that they're producing, the values that they're producing. You know, there was a comment my friend made about the human side. There's nothing less human, to my mind, than telling someone that they're not allowed to deal with their body as they want to. To my mind, that aspect of force is what takes away from the argument.
Yes.
And it's human to allow a person to live by, if they have their own money, for example, and someone wants to sell them it rather than give them it, they should be permitted.
But that's a critical issue you're saying here, because I don't know if you guys have heard, but we ran a whole program, an hour on organ donation once, and in that particular program, there was, in fact, a guy that's quoted here on some other story that we'll be bringing up later, and that has to do with the travel fiasco that we mentioned on the show. But Peter Kormos was one guest, and Frank Cleese, and they actually agreed on something, and that was the need for people to get involved in organ donation. However, and I'm not implicating any of these gentlemen at all, it was raised on a separate occasion. People have been proposing that perhaps it's time for the government to have something in place when you go to get your driver's license, for example, that you don't fill out a card that says, yes, you'd like to donate an organ, but rather, if you choose not to, you fill out a card. And that has been proposed as a very productive way of organ donations, getting the organs required to promote life. But on the other hand, it also presupposes that the state owns your organs and that you have to come forth and say, no, I don't want to give it. Is that the right way to go about this? Food for thought, because I want your opinion on this whole organ donation thing. Now, before we go for a break, I want to hear what you, Ted, have to say on line 4. Hello, Ted, you're on the line.
Hello, Christine. Very interesting topic. I really don't see that this is a left or right issue. That really confuses me. I thought the ad was good. If it gets people to talk about the issue, it's important that we discuss it and come to terms with it. And I find it extremely grotesque whenever we start talking about a person must be able to benefit from donating their organs. That, I think, is disgusting.
Well, Ted, I'm glad you called in with your opinions, because what you're saying there is precisely what we're going to return and talk about. Don't go away. We'll be back after this. Hello again and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Continuing to talk about our first subject. Now, we're referring to an ad put out by the Ontario government, and the intent of this ad is to promote organ donations. But the question that we're addressing here, is it really an effective means to do so? Is it really creative, or is it more creepy? And what we're going to do, because we heard from Ted, and we want to talk more about it because we've also heard from our guests, and we have a little bit of dissension here on certain notions. We'll return to that in a moment. But in case you tuned in after the video, what we're going to do is that we're going to show you that video again. So let's see it now.
Welcome to recycleme.org, the place where recycling moves from our curbsides to our insides. By clicking on this handsome tattoo, you can open me up and learn the ins and outs of organ and tissue donation. The heart, the lungs, even the eyes, they're all here for you to discover. Once you've checked me out, make a pledge to make a difference. Click on the Join the Movement link and become an organ and tissue donor. I've become one to save up to 8 lives, because if I'm not using them, why shouldn't someone else?
And the fellow that you saw on that screen, well, he'll stand there forever once again. But the two of you are in agreement that it falls under the creepy category because that little bucket you saw on the right-hand side of your screen filled with organs.
And the logo bleeds. It couldn't just be a clean thing. They had to have a recycle symbol that literally drips blood.
Now, here's my criticism. It just makes the human body look like some commodity, okay? That's on one hand. But on the other hand, you were talking about being able to charge money, and Ted found that was, in his words, grotesque. It wasn't, if that's the word that you used.
Offensive.
Offensive, he found, yes. Your reply to that?
Yeah, it's not, Ted may have misunderstood what I meant. It's not that a person must be required to sell. It's just that we have to remember in all of this that your organs are not garbage by the side of the road in a recycle bin, as they want us to all believe they are. They have value. They have value to you when you're alive, and they are of value to those.
Now, I'm going to play the other side for a moment because I want to be clear here. I don't agree with that strategy. I don't agree with it at all.
Yeah.
But I know that there are those that are going to argue, and this has been the basis, while you're dead anyway, it's going to rot, it's going to go by the wayside, the worms are going to get it, so why not just let it be useful to somebody else to promote life? And that is the argument here.
It's going to end up on a beach in Somalia.
Oh, goodness.
Well, it'll be, whether they're used or not is a separate issue from who controls their use. And that's all I'm saying, that when the state says, look, if you want to use your organs to save someone's life, you have to do it on our terms. That's what's wrong. And until that changes, then I think it's not right to play their game.
You said a law passed in Ontario recently.
Yeah, there was a law passed.
Tell us what that was, and I want your feedback too, Reverend Williams, because I'm not sure that was widely publicized.
Yeah, I don't think it was. It was just this past December. Effectively, the Trillium Network for the organization that you would register your intentions if you did want to donate your organs. Now, as of December, no longer can you register the fact that you do not consent. And the effect of this is that there's nothing on record with them if you should die, for example, in an accident, or be incapacitated and unable to communicate your wishes. There's nothing there saying, I don't want you to use my organs. This is, in my way of thinking, this is the left again saying, aha, now we've got a way to disentitle people, to take away their power to control what happens with their bodies, and it effectively leaves it to the family then. So they get a second kick at the can. The government then can put the pressure on the family to say, shouldn't we use his organs? Shouldn't you donate them? When the focus should really be on allowing people to control the fate of their own bodies.
Now, I'd be curious how many people really knew that law was passed. Did you know about it, John?
I did,
because a lot of people didn't. I'll tell you
I don't think
automatically
it's passed final
why.
reading yet.
It hasn't passed final reading?
I don't believe so.
I thought it had. Well, as of
because I'll
December,
tell you, any news in December could have gotten lost simply because we were faced of Christmas, an economic free fall, and a coalition.
Yeah.
So it got lost. But it's frightening if such laws are being passed and people don't know about it. John, you wanted to comment.
Well, I was going to say, just in response to what Paul said, that for me, as a person more on the left, the kind of definition, description that he used to, the taking away of choices and that sort of thing, reminds me more of a right-wing perspective. Depends, I suppose, how far right you go, but, Nazism, extremism on one end. Extremism, I guess, in any direction can be troubling. Now, we expect our government and the agencies of our government to have scrutiny, oversight, and control of other bodily things like blood. Our blood supply are scrutinized.
Oh, yes.
we don't force people to give blood either, of course, and it's an integral, important part of our system. But I do find it troubling, as you do, that there would be a compulsion to give, that unless you said otherwise, they would harvest your, and of course that brings in other kinds of problems, like, should we let this person die, or should we,
should
harvest
a person
their,
feel pressured to give organs?
Well, this is the thing. It goes even beyond that. The left-right thing is, more precisely, collectivism versus individualism. In other words, do you have a right to live for your own life, to value your own life, put your own life first and your own happiness first, or is your duty simply to be something that's sacrificed to the whole? And these laws fall into the latter category. You're to sacrifice, not to profit. You're to sacrifice, you're not to control the fate of your own. It's for the global group to determine what happens with you after you're dead. You cease to have any power. It's completely collectivist. Now, but the thing about this is, you were talking about the website earlier. This collectivism always to dehumanize people, to de-individualize them. It's like a cult of death, no matter what they're trying to sell.
And you have an example to give that you wanted to.
There was a website, and here they are trying to convince you that they're really concerned about CO2 levels. And so what do? They're actually concerned. They don't want people having technology that not everybody has. They don't like cars. They don't like wealth. It's a war on an inequality of wealth. So when they attack CO2, and what do? They have you take a test as a child.
So it's geared toward children.
Geared toward children, school
What
children.
age group?
I think it was ages 9 to 15 or something. It was in Australia.
High school, yes.
And they ask, does your family use a car? That puts you into more of a pig category. They got 3 little pigs, and you're the pig on the right, and it gets bigger and bigger the more you produce. If you cook your food, well, then you're producing CO2, and et cetera. And at the end of the questions, you get this huge pig, if you're like any North American, with fangs and hair and et cetera. And then it says, push the button to see how long you should live.
Oh, goodness.
You click the button, the pig explodes into a pile of brains, eyeballs, hair, blood, mucus, pus. And at the bottom it says, you should die at age 2.
Oh, goodness.
So that you don't use more than your share of the Earth's resources
Oh, my
and CO2.
goodness. That is terrifying. Now, I'm curious what you're going to say, Reverend Williams. You know why? Because you are a strong supporter of environmentalism.
And
but
children.
what do you think? And children.
Yeah.
So you're kind of doubling them up there. But what do you think of that strategy?
Well, I think that children, because of their twisted sense of humor, would laugh at it. But I think it's morbid, and I think it's offensive, and it doesn't appeal to me. Another part of my life is that I've had a lot to do with death. I performed hundreds and hundreds of funerals, and and been around death and dying and all that a lot. And I'm not troubled by that, but I do recognize that we have already monetized a lot of that. We monetized our care, we monetize the funeral processes, we monetize everything, and in the process we constantly destroy the earth. I have concerns around us doing these horrible things to one another. I agree with you about respect for humanity and individuality. As a Christian and as a democratic thinker and citizen, I believe that my individuality and yours and all of ours is critical. If we don't respect and maintain it for all of us, then we all lose. This is I guess the best way to think about it. And I think that it's important that we continue to give people choices. I agree with Paul in this matter. I'm not as much of a business-minded person, perhaps, as I should be, but I have a different calling in life. So
You know what? It's fair. It should be about choice, and people shouldn't be feeling pressured. Let's go now to Sarah on line 4. Hi, Sarah. You're on the line.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for this particular issue today. I have a card that I signed when I want to renew my health card, and I had said yes, I would be a donor owner. God forbid, wherever I go, I'm not going to need them, so anybody that were to need them, by all means. The comment as far as money, and I'm not stating that your guest has said yes, that it should be paid for, but to me that's like a personal issue, and if you feel that you want to, you should be able to. But as far as the money issue, I find very offensive.
Yes, go ahead.
John?
Sarah, thank you for calling in.
I understand that, Sarah. My wife has a cornea disease, and she's going to require cornea transplants. The government has just taken that out of HOHIP, that particular kind of transplant.
Wow.
And we certainly, it's hard to come up with $100,000 for
No
a surgery.
kidding. That's a lot.
And to find, to find the money to buy those necessary, body parts. I mean, we are a compassionate society. I think that, we are a just society and compassionate. And whether left or right, within the spectrum of Canadian belief and practice and doctrine, I think that there is a strong element of compassion. And we want to prosper financially. We want all of us to prosper financially, but we also want good health. We want justice. Yes. We want fairness. We want reasonableness. We want inclusivity, so that everybody's human, everybody's a part of the mix, whether from childhood to old age, everybody should be important.
Okay, and we're going to have to go for a break on that. Now, when we come back, we're going to go along to the second subject matter because we've got two more very important issues we're going to be addressing, so don't go away. We'll return. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. We're going on to our second subject matter now, and it concerns the problem that we're seeing off the Somali coast with the pirates. So let's take a look at that story on the screen now. Don't pay ransom to pirates. Now, it's a Somalian prime minister that's saying this because his angle is when you pay this kind of money out to these pirates, you're worsening the problem. But you see, it's twofold because you've got these merchant ships passing through, losing a lot of money in business, lives are at risk. So these pirates so far have managed to gain millions of dollars. He's saying, do not pay that money out. What's your position on that, Paul? Okay, I'm going to start off by asking, if it was your family member on board, for example, because this opens a whole hijack issue, and we've known this has been an issue that hasn't just come up of recent times, it's just come up again because of the Somali issue with the pirates. But over time it has come up where a hijacking situation is at hand, and if you had a family member on board, whether it be a ship, whether it be a plane, would you want that ransom money to be paid out? Because you probably would, under the emotions of the moment, but then again, you're empowering these kinds of people to go ahead and do it again, maybe to somebody else's family. And you might be thinking, well, you know what, at that point I'm thinking about my family. You see, all of this is valid. But the Prime Minister here is saying, don't pay out the money. I'm curious to hear how you feel on this issue when it comes to dealing with pirates and people who hijack planes and so forth. What's the right approach there, Paul, in your opinion?
Bang, bang, bang. That's the
I think you might have a lot of company there, to be honest.
Yeah,
Not everybody, but you got quite a bit of company there.
Yeah, the right approach to anybody who points a gun in your face and says, give me your money, is to reach into your pocket and give them a couple bullets of lead. These, if anyone were to spend money, it wouldn't be, this is a perfect, Mel Gibson payback situation. If anybody's going to be spending money because, they don't want to go there and police it themselves, then give them the money, offer the money out to people who will go out and sink these ships, period.
Yes.
But not taxpayer money. Preferably the people who are being attacked are the ones who should be spending their own money to defend their own vessels. And,
what about the hostages? What do you do about people in this particular predicament?
Well, there is some talk about I think in these situations, the hostages are often brought on shore. Mm-hmm. They're fed spaghetti, they're fed, they're fed well and all this kind of stuff.
They're safe.
Yeah, they're safe. But I think to prevent the hostage taking in the first place, it's both an on land and at sea.
You should never give in, you're saying. Never give in.
No, I don't think you ever give in.
There was another situation, if you remember, and this was in the paper sometime last week, or maybe even the week before, where Canada and the French chased down these bums. And unfortunately, when they caught them, they disarmed them. There was this picture captioned of these pirates standing there with their hands up. But they had to release them because, and you wonder, well, why would they release them? But I suppose you can deduce from this the logical aspect that it's under international law that unless they attack you first, and this came out afterward, you're not allowed to take these people and detain them. They have to do something first. You think it's time that we come up with some mechanism to deal with this kind of tragedy in some cases?
There is something to be said for, you'd have to go by the evidence that's available to you at the time. If it looks as though they're about to attack, well, then I think fair game. Go ahead and prevent the attack.
Well, they're armed and they're coming at you.
Right.
We know what they're after.
Yeah. However, there's also this counter story that's being, somehow misapplied.
Yes.
There's this dumping going on by mafia.
Let's put that up on our screen now if we can, and that's a supplementary article that we've prepared for you in defense of pirates. Now, this guy is an environmentalist, and he said, look, why are we making a big issue about the pirates when dumping and overfishing has caused, indirectly, at least about 300 deaths, whereas the pirates taking control of these merchant ships, yes, there have been some deaths, but nothing in comparison to the 300. Now, I have an issue with that kind of a comparison because you can say, well, if you happen to live in the GTA or you happen to live, let's say, in Hamilton where Stelco and Dofasco is in operation, deaths associated with that through lung disease, cancer, breathing problems, heart disease, how many deaths were attributed to that compared to murderers that you find at large in the street? So I cannot understand why anybody with any brain would make that kind of a comparison, and that's my little
I just don't think
point here.
I don't think an abacus.
Can't be normal.
I don't think an abacus has anything to do with morality. I don't care how many beads you put on one issue and how many beads you put on the other. Two evils don't make a good.
No.
Right.
But don't compare them.
Right. But I think, though, if in fact, as he's kind of suggesting falsely, people are taking to boats to protect the shoreline from overfishing, fishing in waters that are property of locals, or to prevent dumping of toxic chemicals, hey, fair game.
Pirates have always done these things, though, and I think he's looking at a cause here. But pirates have always plundered people. It's
oh, sure, but if what they're doing is not plundering, but rather defending the country from dumpers, then I don't think anybody should be shooting them. In fact, if anything, they should be shooting the mafia who are allegedly dropping.
Did you notice, though, that this particular guy did not mention the Islamic insurgency that's taking place in Somalia, where over 1 million is displaced and thousands have been killed? He doesn't mention that. He only mentions the 300 that perhaps died as a result of dumping and overfishing, blaming the West from that point of view.
Yeah, this region, as many people know, is the kind of nexus point in a global set of events and dynamics. And in that particular region, the strongest kind of mover is our neighbor to the south. The American military has strong presence there, and we understand why to some degree. But I did find an article here about their base in Djibouti, which is a small country adjacent to Somalia, and on the the Gulf of Hormuz, or in that area near the Red Sea, and America has been launching a kind of a military agenda from a number of bases around there. Of course, we know about Iraq, and we know about Afghanistan. And speaking of Afghanistan, what this Prime Minister was saying reminded me very much of what has been going on in Afghanistan, where our armed forces are presently, in that there's a belief by the local authorities that the solutions must be local, and that they need the money to be able to implement solutions at that level, so that we, at this end, don't have to deal with them in the same way. So it's a kind of dimensional set of problems that involve the French colonial
Do you buy
power.
this guy's argument, though, in defense of pirates? Do you buy that argument?
Well, I don't buy any argument in defense of any kind of
Yes, and
violence.
I agree there.
Myself,
Yes.
whether it's American violence there, or French, or Canadian, or Yemeni, or Saudi Arabian. I mean, I don't care. I just don't particularly agree with violence. I've seen too much of it.
Okay, now what do we do about those pirates? Let's go ahead to Mike on line 4. Hi, Mike. You're on the line.
Christine, thanks for taking my call.
Okay.
What I think is that you'd have a lot less abductions, a lot less piracy if the insurance companies required these tankers to put an onboard security force.
You know what? That's good. What Mike said there is logical. So you wonder, well, we know that there's a problem with these Somalian pirates. Why isn't this being done?
Yeah, we might also look at the European countries, who seem to be a large part of the contributors to the pollution quotient in that region. I mean, all of these terrible wastes, from uranium to heavy metals to human waste, from kind of stuff we were talking about in the last story. That all these things are being washed up on the beaches, and they're being deposited there because there's and this is where the kind of mafia aspect comes in, as far as I can understand from what I've read, that in Europe there's a high cost to disposing of this kind of volatile substances. Yeah, and $1,000 a ton is the going rate, and this stuff is being dumped for $2.50 a ton. That's TONNE, so it's 2.5 tons. Wow. I mean, this is a lot of toxic waste, and it's creating a serious problem. And we know that Europe is the kind of the beacon of environmentalism. And yet,
true.
This is mostly European waste, as far as I can tell, that is being deposited in Somalia, and it's so easy for a state to fail like this when the international community does not do the right things, and when people take advantage because it's the capitalist thing to do.
No, but you're being fair in your opinion here.
I try.
But no one's going to convince me that that's why the pirates are out there plundering these goods. We all know that. But you're being fair here. But I want to hear your reply to that, because I know we're seeing a little bit of a disagreement here with a capitalist. You grew up with pirates, okay? Yeah. Who are they?
Well, in the north where I came from, there are a lot of large mining corporations and the pirates in this case were local enterprising people who wanted gold too.
So that you went right into what I was going to talk about here. You've got the capitalist, and you've got the person that's not so capitalist.
Sure.
Okay, Paul.
Well, I think that if these quote-unquote pirates want to do something that's valuable and honest work, then their own government should protect that country by paying them as soldiers to shoot or destroy those who are dumping the garbage. And all of a sudden, the price of that garbage disposal will go skyrocketing, because it turns out that 50% of the time we die when we do it. So we want to charge more than $2.50 a ton. I think if you have at sea Somali policemen, Somali Coast Guard, funded not by North American but by Somali taxpayers, then you can kill two birds with one stone. Perhaps hire some of those pilots to be police officers. The notion, though, of North America sending money so that Somalia can have a police force, that's ridiculous.
No.
That's just an encouragement to have the government itself have people go out and be pirates. Let's create a problem so that North America will give us money. I think it's a huge mistake.
It's like having a pirate fund.
There's another thing behind all of this as well, and that's oil. I mean, this is kind of one of the greatest oil resources in the world. It's coming out through the Red Sea. It's coming from Saudi Arabia. It's coming from Yemen. It's coming from these other countries. And it's the export of oil.
It's a huge trade going on there.
Well, it's the export of oil that is at the root of almost all of this hunger, famine, violence, piracy, everything. And that's why America's there to protect their interests and other countries. I mean, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that this is the real politic of the situation, that oil is driving all of this.
Paul, any feedback on this?
No. I mean, no, yes, I have feedback, but no, oil's not driving all of it. Corrupt philosophy is doing it. And the whole idea, again, collectivism, the lack of worth of the individual, the lack of rights, and rampant Islamist, by which I mean religious government has been just killing the entire continent. It's moving like a black plague throughout the continent.
You know, we could do an entire hour on the power of oil in this world, and perhaps we'll do it on another show. Now, before we go for a break, because I want to get to this conquest fiasco. This was a disaster. Imagine being in these people's position. We'll be talking about it shortly, but Abdi on line 4, we'll go to you first. You're on the line.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine, thank you.
I come from Somalia. I've been here for 25 years. Somalia has been without a government for at least 20 years, and Europeans have been overfishing in Somalia for over 20 years and dumping in garbage. And you personally don't believe that the pirates are doing this for fun. They can't fish anymore. Their nets have been cut by the European trawlers, and that's why they're doing. They just want to protect. And by doing that, they've been blamed to causing all kinds of things. So personally, now at least everybody's talking about it, and they're trying to help them out, and I'm really happy to see that something's going to come up. But you should see how many garbage did they do in Europeans dumping in Somalia for 20 years at least.
Abdi, I want to thank you for your call, and I'm not going to argue with you because obviously what you said, it can be argued. I understand the plight of what you said of some of these Somalian pirates, but I will say that the world is in a situation right now where capitalism is being blamed for every evil that we see. One of the casualties of capitalism happens to be poverty. It's something that we'll always have on the face of the earth, no matter what you do. But the question then remains, so what would you rather? A radical Islamist regime, is that any better? Because you're complaining about the Europeans, not just you, but I hear this all the time, but what about the insurgency that's happening with the Islamists in Somalia, where 1 million of people are displaced and thousands are dead? What about people that are living under these horrible, oppressive regimes? We don't know, most people don't even know what's happening in a place like Cuba, where we're vacationing, having a wonderful time, but we don't know what's going on behind those iron curtains either. There are huge injustices happening in this world. Some of it is sneaking out from Durban too, but a lot of it is kept under wraps. But it's the capitalist agenda that always seems to get the blame. Yet, I don't see people from the West trying to get plane tickets to go over to these countries and live there, but I see a lot of you out there that criticize the capitalist system wanting to live in the West. And my big question to you all is why? Go ahead.
The capitalist system is the system where you have to produce to live. The collectivist system, the socialist system, is the one where you have to steal to live. And of course, if nobody's producing, under that system you eventually become impoverished. Poverty is the result not of capitalism, but the result of stealing to live. And capitalism is the only thing that gives Africa a hope. But to have capitalism, you first have to have sound morality. You have to believe in the dignity of the individual, in their rights of life, liberty, and property. And if you don't have that moral base, you don't have a chance in heck of having a capitalist system.
Yes, and we're going to have to go for a break because I'll tell you what, we're running out of time here and we've got to get to this conquest vacation story. We'll be back after this. Don't go away. going. Did I get a little bit passionate? That's unusual. Okay, thank you. Yeah, please add it in, yeah. That's a good topic because, that's a good point there because it shows how we in the West live.
Police apparently too.
Hello again, welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. You got a quick comment before we move over to the third?
Yeah, I mean, the Spanish came in and overfished the Canadian waters, but you didn't see Newfoundlanders getting out there and bombing their boats with with arms. We don't do that in a civilized country, and it shouldn't be done in Somalia either. It shouldn't be tolerated there either.
Although we took some of their trawlers, and we're reselling them.
Okay, now we're going to go on to our third topic. Let's take a look at that up on our screen now. Tourists told to pay twice or face jail. That's just one particular, well, some of them have faced this, but all of them attached to this mess have faced something or another. I mean, this article highlights the story of this one young lady that was on vacation, and she was told, you got to pay up that $1,000. If you don't, you're going to face jail. Well, fortunately enough for this young lady, her mother called, paid the bill on credit card, or she likely would have gone to jail. This has been an utter disaster, what has happened to Conquest Vacations, and we're seeing it now in terms of hindsight. And we know the story about hindsight, but Peter Cormos made a suggestion which was very interesting, and it's in an article that we have here. What he was saying is that perhaps we need to look at these things beforehand. If a vacation provider is in trouble, it needs to be assessed right away and perhaps needs to be ended at that point, as opposed to going along and allowing such a fiasco to take place. We'll get into more as we talk about this particular story. Go ahead,
Well,
John.
there's just two issues briefly for me here. The first is that this is another casualty of the economic problem that the whole world's faced with right now.
Yes, it is.
You know,
Definitely.
it's another company that has taken a hard bash, and the clients are suffering. But it's also a bit of a wake-up call to those Canadians who do not yet realize that there are some terrible things going on in the world. We live in a bit of a fool's paradise here. Everybody's walking around in a fantasy world, going, "Oh, life is so stable and calm here in Canada," and let's go on a vacation to Mexico. Mexico has been embroiled in civil wars and dissent, and there are 3,000 deaths on the border with the U.S. There's a full-scale war going on there. there, there's crime, there's all kinds of terrible things going on there, and then we are surprised when these things happen to our citizens. So I think we have to get over our naivety and recognize the real situation in the world, that we are in danger all the time, that the world is in great danger, and that we have to do something decisive, appropriate, and effective to override that, or we will perish.
Now, the Travel Council of Ontario has been bailing people out, if you want to put it that way. There is a fund in place.
There is.
And Bill, basically what you're saying is we really have been living in a fool's paradise with our expectations. Now, this leads us right into, again, to compensation. Do you think people should be compensated for this?
Well, there is insurance of some sort, but just to understand, I mean, we were just been talking about Somalia, where you mentioned 1 million people were displaced and maybe 1 million died. I mean, this is a story all over the world, and here in Canada, we live in a most incredible society and culture, and it blinds many people to what's going on everywhere else.
Well, I'm happy to see these vacationers bailed out, if you want to put it that way, but the word bailout has become a hot button word these days. How far do we go with this? I mean, I have to say, on a personal level, I really feel for these people, because we know we live in a high-stress society as is. When people go on vacations, it's their dream vacation. Some people can't even afford to go on vacation, so they save up for years in advance, only to go and find that, hey, they've got to come up with a lot of extra cash they didn't plan on, or face jail. This is a travesty. Do you think that there needs to be a review of the travel agencies here? Because we're looking at the Ontario Premier Dalton McGuinty calling for a review of the Travel Industry Council of Ontario.
Not only do we need one, we're going to see one.
I believe we are. I think it's inevitable. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I think the first thing is that we have to make sure that we make it clear to everybody, including those who choose to operate these agencies, that they are agents, and that the money that they receive should be spent first on the intended purpose, and if there's a difference between what the cost was and what the person paid, that's your profit. You don't get to keep the whole amount and then say, well, we'll settle the bills later on. No, that money's trust money to the extent that it's money to be paid to the hotel. I think the problem is that agents have been allowed to pocket the money and gamble with their customers' money, and that's
Do you think
not right.
the Travel Industry Council of Ontario, in this case, should have acted much sooner? I mean, now that we're looking in hindsight once again, but do you think it should have?
You know, it may be the case that
they gave a deadline to Conquest of April 14th to get its act together, and on that announcement, Conquest
to the extent that it knew that they were not operating themselves in a way that would guarantee their solvency, at least the solvency of the availability of the funds they need to pay the amounts owing for their customers. Yeah, they should have acted right away. But I think, you know, you got to be a little bit careful about interfering too much with contractual relations. You want to make sure that agents have a variety of different plans open to people. And as long as the people who are dealing with you as an agency.
What could we learn from this? We're down to less than a minute. What could we learn from this? Anything?
We need more disclosure to the customer about what is the nature of the agreement. Am I guaranteed that it'll be paid, or do you get to have my money and gamble with it? That has to be put out front.
Yes.
We also have to let people who are doing this kind of business know that the law will come and get them if they do wrong.
Well said.
My heart goes out to these people.
But won't bail them out taxpayer
We'll
money.
give them a nice place to stay.
Do you agree with the bailout? Do you agree with bailing them out taxpayer money in this case?
Well, that's not the kind of money that is available. There's a fund that has been put together by travel agents, and that's the money that's going to be.
And that's all the time we have for today. See you again next time. I'm Christine Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.